No need to adjust your television. This is what I'm wearing. Welcome back to the Scale Builders Guild. Thanks again for watching. Today we're taking a first look and build review of the SSD Trail King. The SSD Trail King is an excellent kit for those looking to get into the super scale or very accurate end of scale RC modeling. Right off the bat, I do want to say that you will see a lot of similarities between the SSD Trail King and the Axial SCX-10 II platform. SSD has put their spin on it, added a lot of really excellent features, and the value is certainly there. Let's dive right in and take a look at this kit. I decided to dress up mine with some RC 4-wheel drive Milestar Patagonia 4.19 tires and SSD wheels. I don't remember which ones these are. They were in my parts bin, and I thought it was a nice combo just to kind of get this chassis finished. On first glance of the finished kit, you will see that the chassis rails are very similar to the SCX-10 II. They are in fact almost the exact same geometry. There is an additional unit on the rear to make the chassis rails slightly bit longer, but overall the dimensions are very, very similar to the Axial SCX-10 II. I'm going to start from the very bottom and work my way up. Very similar to how the manual goes together, in fact. And speaking of that manual, it is a very nicely detailed manual, pretty easy to follow. If you've built a kit before, you shouldn't have any trouble. I certainly didn't. There were a few addendums to that manual that should definitely be used. They are some very important steps that should not be overlooked. So when you're putting it together, be sure to have those addendums handy while you're doing the build. All the hardware is included. Everything you need to get you started, of course, is there. The only thing, and this is much like the Raw Builders kit or any of the newer kits that are coming out, there are no wheels and tires included. You will have to provide those yourself, as well as some sort of body and electronics later on down the road. Aside from the chassis rails and skid plates, this is basically an entirely new kit. SSD really did their homework in putting together what I would consider a great starting point for your next ultra scale build. If you are going to do a class 0 or a very light duty class 1 truck, this is a great place to start. It really is. There is a tremendous amount of excellent materials here, lots of aluminum, lots of titanium, and lots of steel as well. Not only are you getting a great performing chassis, but you are getting a lot of scale details that you will not find in any other kit off the shelf. Both front and rear axles of the Trail King are 3-piece plastic molded design. They do offer 2 different options for diff covers, so you can have a more competitive style one like the ones I've got on here, or a more traditional all the way around bolted style that may come on a stock truck. In addition to those molded plastic pieces, the kit does include aluminum C-hubs and knuckles, so you're already looking at a nice upgrade right out of the box. The link mounts are double shear, shock mounts are single shear. The front pumpkin is offset, so it does have that very cool, accurate look. And there is a ton of steering in this front axle. I was actually kind of shocked when I turned it all the way. I don't even know that you could get effective steering at this angle out of it. You probably would be binding up the universals, which are another inclusion I might add. That's pretty amazing. I'm going to check that once we got electronics installed in this truck. I'm definitely going to see how much of a steering bonus this is, because this is pretty crazy. It's way beyond anything I've seen in any kit on the market to date, and that to me is pretty shocking. This is more of a comp setup for steering than anything else, so I'm going to see if I can actually get this to work in some of my comp trucks, I think. Metal drive shafts connect the axles to the divorce transfer case. SSD, I think, I'm not sure at this point, but I do think they're going to offer an overdrive option from the transfer case rather than from the axle. I'm not totally sure on that, so don't take my word for it. I could be completely wrong. Links are all titanium, which is a really nice upgrade, not something you see in a kit usually, certainly not at this price point. So it's a nice little bonus to have those included. Those are all the links too, steering drag link, panhard link, everything. They're all titanium, which is a really nice thing. And a note about the installation, SSD made it so the lower links are actually a much wider diameter than the top links, so it's really hard to screw up where links are supposed to go. and I'm sure that's partially a weight saving and cost saving opportunity to make the links up top from a smaller diameter, but from a building standpoint, that is a really nice feature and it's something that I wanted to point out. Shocks are completely assembled from the factory and they are aluminum throughout. There is no plastic piece. Even the shock collars are aluminum as well, which is a really nice touch. A great upgrade. When I was assembling these, I put a little Team Associated green slime underneath. I just did a quick disassembly to make sure that these weren't going to leak, and so far they haven't leaked whatsoever. Of course, it's just sitting on the bench, but that sometimes is enough for an axial shock to leak. SSD does include this very nicely molded ABS plastic motor cover. It is designed to look similar to, I believe, a Chevy motor, so that's sort of a hint as to where I'm going to take this eventually. If you've got any guesses for what type of body I'm going to be putting on this Trail King, put your comment down below. You know I love reading through all your feedback. I mean, I think it's pretty obvious, but maybe it isn't. SSD did a pretty decent job of keeping the motor pretty low in the truck. With the inclusion of the oil pan on this motor cover, you will run into some binding if you try to go to full compression. I think that could be remedied by removing that oil pan. For all intents and purposes, it is a cosmetic thing only. And really, honestly, if you're looking to gain a little bit more performance, it's probably best to take that off anyway. SSD also includes this very nicely molded fuel cell. You can use this as a receiver box or possibly an ESC box, depending on how you decide to set up your electronics. It is a nice looking piece and it's pretty well detailed, but the position of it isn't great. It'll definitely interfere with a lot of truck bodies out there. And if you're going to be using a hard body, you might have to lose it. I'm going to see if I can repurpose it or maybe find a different place for it to sit, because I do like it and I do want to see if I can't make good use of it. There's also this really nicely molded transmission and divorce transfer case to complete the scale accurate driveline. Battery placement, SSD does include a nice stamped steel platform for you to put your battery on, Velcro loops to hold it in place. You should be able to put a nice standard 5000 milliamp 3S pack in there without issue. It does sit a little bit high on the chassis, but there really isn't much any other place that you could put it. When you go to a scale drivetrain like this, you really kind of need to make a sacrifice somewhere, and that's battery position in this case. Some people, myself included, did find that the motor position relative to the chassis was a bit backwards of where it should be. It's not sitting so close to the front of the truck. It doesn't sit over the front axle. It's not totally accurate in that regard. Whether SSD designed the engine to sit that way on purpose or whether or not they didn't, it doesn't really matter, because they do offer on Thingiverse some prints that you can print out to extend that transmission case, so you can actually push that whole motor assembly further forward in the truck. This one is the longer 23mm one, and that should put the engine right up against where the servo is going to sit, which is exactly what I want. If you don't have the option to print one of these out at home, I'm sure one of your friends in this hobby has a 3D printer, and if they don't, of course, you can send it off to Shapeways and have them print it for you. This is a great addition though, and it does show that SSD is paying attention to their customers and the market, and know that people want realism more than anything else. Shock towers are plastic, but they are of the same plastic compound that the axles are, so they are pretty firm. They definitely feel like they would take a fair number of hits. One nice bonus though is that on the driver's side, rather than using a plastic drop down for the panhard link, this is actually a machined aluminum piece to bolt your panhard to. So it's a nice stable piece that won't be breaking anytime soon. It just gives you another little bit of confidence in your truck. Both front and rear bumper mounts are machined aluminum as well, so you will be able to bolt up any axial SCX-10-2 compatible style of bumper. That's what they're designed for. You may have to trim some of them to get them to sit as flush as possible, just because of where the servo mount sits in this truck. One other really nice feature about the SSD Trail King is the way in which they designed the sliders and the integrated belly pan. There are two additional pieces that bolt over where the sliders would attach. I think it's a great way of integrating one extra piece of plastic to make this a much smoother truck underneath. You won't be getting caught up on any obstacles, especially with the way the links have been designed to ride lower than the drive shafts. I can honestly say that when I first saw the SSD Trail King hit the market a few months back, I wasn't really convinced, and I wasn't sure why this was coming out on an existing platform and what new sort of things was going to make it a good value. Now, having had it in the workshop for a few days and being able to spend some time building it and seeing what goes into the SSD Trail King, I can say confidently that at the price it's at right now, you are definitely getting good value. I really do like the fact that it's got a scale motor, scale transmission, and scale transfer case, all in a package that is very attractive, not just in terms of price, but in terms of the actual aesthetics of the build as well. I think this has a lot of potential and is certain to be popular with those people who are looking to get into Class 0 and Class 1 trucks. There is a lot of plastic in this kit, so that amount of chassis flex isn't unexpected. I do have a few concerns regarding the axle build. They did go together just fine, but the three-piece design where the tubes go into the pumpkin do kind of concern me. Yes, 3 bolts do hold the assembly to itself, but I'm not totally convinced. There was a bit of flex just in the hand as I was putting them together. I'm sure that if you are not trying to blast through a Class 2 course and just get bound up, this will be totally fine. So I'm probably overthinking that. I do wish there was room for a servo winch as well. I think that's sort of mandatory nowadays. Most people like to run those from a competition standpoint. Again, if you're comping with this, I'm sure you'll come up with some other solution. Other than that, there's not much to not like. I'll be sure to put a link down below where you can check out the SSD Trail King. Hey, and if you're enjoying this video, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and hit that notification bell so you get updates anytime there's a new video from the Scale Builders Guild. So would I recommend the SSD Trail King? I do think I would. If you're looking to get into scale accurate design, you want to have something that is a familiar platform that will accept a lot of upgrades that you might already have on the shelf, the SSD Trail King is a great choice. The best way I can sum it up, I think, is to say that the SSD Trail King is sort of like buying an Axial SCX-10 II Pro builder's kit. That's the best way I could describe it, and I think that's probably a fairly accurate way, as it is using the same chassis rails and a lot of the same basic elements of the SCX-10 II. This is a much more extreme, much more value conscious, but still pretty high on the level of detail and upgrades right out of the box. In coming weeks, I'll be putting together the rest of this build. I do have some pretty fun plans in mind, and I do hope that you'll stick around and tune in for that when they come up. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you again soon.